Gospel reading today has many points about it. And one of the first ones that I would like to start with is a continuation of our talks about misused words in the Orthodox Church. The Gospel is about a doctor who comes to Christ asking about what he should do to obtain salvation. In a sense, he's asking about purity. What does he have to do to be pure? What sort of things must he be doing to get into that state? Because a state of purity is a state of being saved. So the word that we're going to concentrate on today is purity. Pure. To be pure. Try and search the scriptures. Try and search many of the writings of the saints, and you'll be very, very lucky to come across the word in orthodoxy of pure, unless it's directly in reference to Christ or perhaps his mother. In other words, purity, the word purity, is not really a word that we use in our theology and in our prayers of the church. And there are good reasons for this. I'll give you a fairly crude example. There's a chemical which is readily available in shops. It's called baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. You use it for baking, to rise up a dough when you don't want to use yeast, for example. It's a good cleaning product as well, and a deodorizer. And you can buy 20 kilograms of this for about $30 if you just look around. That's a lot of kilograms of baking soda. However, if you ask that company for an essay of its contents, an essay being a list of all the chemicals that are in that sodium bicarbonate, you'll find that it's got something like 98% sodium bicarbonate, and then a whole list, maybe 20 or 30 different chemicals. You say, what? And some of these are lead salts, arsenic salts, aluminium salts, very common. All these sort of other chemicals which are actually deadly, cancerous, and really not required by the body at all, not even in trace amounts. So what's the situation then? You buy this sodium bicarbonate, you pay good money for it, and it's really only 98%. The rest is full of impurities. So what do? Scratch your head. Go to a health food shop. They sell it too. Slightly better quality. Again, you might pay $20 for half a kilo. That's a big difference from paying $30 for 20 kilos. Again, you look at the essays on that, and it says 99% sodium bicarbonate, 1% of all these other chemicals, again, very similar to the initial one. So again, it's polluted, it's not pure, and yet it's there to be partaken by us, by people. Then you refer yourself to a chemical supply company. Call them up. Do you have sodium bicarbonate? Yes. How much? Depends on the quality you want. I want the pure one. Well, we have one at 99.5%, and that one is $150 for 200 grams. But what's the other chemicals in it? And they can read them out to you. Very similar to the previous. Do you think you're better than that? Well, we have reagent quality, which is the best we can get. It's 99.9%, but it's very expensive. It's like $800 for 100 grams, And again, it's impure. It's got these poisons in it of various types. This is a very common situation in the world that we live today. There is nothing, whether it be physical or of a spiritual nature that we are in contact with, which is pure in this world. The impurity is part of the fall that occurred, that we inherit from Adam, and that the world inherits. No matter how hard you try to get, for example, a pure substance, there's always going to be an impurity in it. Those people who might be investing in precious metals like gold or silver, palladium, platinum, all those sorts of things, will understand this very well, because if you want to buy a little gold coin or a gold bar or something, on it is stamped 99.99% gold. Well, what about the rest? Again, it's full of impurities. Not a lot, but enough to make it not 100%. And so it goes on. Have a look at any packaged food on the shelves in the supermarket, and have a little footnote there. Made by machinery which processes nuts and eggs and things like that. So in other words, you might buy something that you like to eat, but you've got an allergy to nuts and eggs, but you can't eat this because it's made by machinery which has contaminated that one. It's impure. But it doesn't stop here, because impurity isn't just to material things, but to spiritual things as well. This is why in the Orthodox Church we don't talk about purity. You know, you come to confession, and if you walk away thinking that you are now purified, you are very, very mistaken. Very mistaken indeed. Confession is not a process of purification. It's a process of you becoming aware of your shortcomings and making a promise before God to be doing something about it. It doesn't purify you and make you the state that Adam was when he was created. Pure, in no way contaminated in either body, mind, soul, spirit, any other way. However, as I often have mentioned on these talks about certain words, the Christian world, the so-called Christians that are outside the Orthodox Church, have whole theologies about purity. And they make up all sorts of things by which they hope that they can be made pure while still living here on earth, and even after their repose. This is one of the things that roadblocks those people from spiritual progress. The moment you think you're pure, well, what is there then to struggle for? Well, if you're pure, what are you going to do? If you're 100% pure, what are you going to be struggling for to fix up? Nothing. In other words, it becomes an excuse to do nothing in your so-called Christian faith. Lie about and do nothing, you know, or go on with your life. I think we're pure, so why do it? In Orthodoxy, the only time we might mention purity is in reference to monastics, for example, and the fact that they do not live with a spouse. We say that this is a sort of a life of purity. Doesn't mean they're pure, it just means that they have this sort of life where they have sacrificed the gifts of married life in order to serve the Lord. However, some of the ones we've spoken to, and righteous and even like holy men, say to me that I'm old, I'm 85, you know, I've been a priest and a monk for all this time, yet when I see a particular woman, it sets off all sorts of things in me. No purity. not perfect purity anyway, in mind, not in soul. There's an impurity there. This is why we don't use that word, and we never ever consider that we are pure. Like this particular doctor that came to Christ, seeking to be pure and therefore knowing that he is saved and therefore he doesn't have to do anything else. But he fails miserably when Christ gives him this little talk about the man who went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, fell among robbers, was beaten up, mugged, stuff stolen from him and whatever. And all the ones that thought they were pure, like the priest and the Levite and all those, ignored him even though they came by him. But this man, a Samaritan, and the Samaritan is one who is disdained by the Hebrews, picked him up, took him to an inn, took care of him, and asked the innkeeper to watch him and he will pay him back anything he spent. So I've said to you on other occasions, he didn't take him to his own house for obvious reasons, because this person that got beaten up, got mugged, he doesn't know who he is. How does he know he's not a bandit himself and a thief and a robber, perhaps even a murderer? Why bring him into his own house, in his own sanctuary, and perhaps have that desecrated by this person despite the fact that he's having a hard time? So he takes him to a neutral place, to an inn, and pays the people there to look after him until he's better. Then he asks this doctor, Christ asks, so who's the one who is the neighbour? And obviously the answer is that it's this Samaritan who did a neighbourly thing to this particular mugged person. He's a neighbour to him. He's not a brother to him, nor is he a friend of him necessarily. But he's simply someone who has done a good deed to an unknown stranger and at arm's length, so that he himself doesn't get polluted in any way or desecrated in any way, or his family or his household or anything of that type. This is important for you to understand yourselves. We, of course, come across situations like this often in our life. People wanting some sort of help. And by all means, if you have the capacity, you do help them. And if you can give them a good word about what you believe in, then it's your duty to do that. But you have to be careful not to take them into your confidence too quickly, because that can become a disastrous situation when the person starts to reveal what's really in their soul. We must admit that we ourselves have been burnt with that several times, trusting somebody who's even come under the guise of being Orthodox. But when you get to know them properly, it's the opposite. They have great problems, and those problems can be forced upon those who are trying to help them. So that's the reading today about this passage, which is known popularly as the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan has many aspects to it. As you know, that tomorrow, in which we commemorate the beginning of Nativity Lent, Nativity Fast, it's also the day of the commemoration of the glorification of Saint Herman, which is one of our patron saints here in the church. And if you recall last time when we spoke about certain words, made the point that a lot of the food that we have and that we are pretty much forced to eat during Lenten periods is contaminated, obviously, and is not healthy on account of the fact that it's been fiddled with both genetically and chemically in various ways. Particularly food from from breads, from flour products, wheat, barley, oats, rye, all those sorts of things. Since the 1950s, more and more of those products have been made unsuitable for digestion and very suitable for the growth of various autoimmune sicknesses, cancers and diabetes and all sorts of things like that. And you can read about that. There's so much of that available, but you won't find it on sort of government or official sites because they still want to push the agenda of the big companies, the world authorities, in order to be making heaps of money and to be killing off the overpopulated world, as they say. The world's overpopulated. It needs to be reduced by 3/4 or something, like some particular figure somebody's come up with the past couple of years. The situation with this is that the fast, as I said to you last time, does not by itself purify you, nor does it make it pleasing to the Lord that you haven't tasted anything that is not on the calendar for that day. But by not partaking of certain foods, the body, and therefore its relationship to the soul, is able to see things a bit clearer and feel things a bit clearer, and is able to zero in more on the spiritual life and what needs to be taken care of. The deacon who served with our late Father Vladimir in the 1980s, who lives now in New York, went on a whole great fast of water only, some 49 days or something, water only. And talk about purity. He said liquid mercury was expelled from him after several weeks of that sort of fast. So you see that the Holy Fathers with their fasting things kill many issues which are detrimental to health, spiritual health and physical health. By doing those fasting things, we can fix up many possible sicknesses, and of course the most important being the sickness of the soul that sees things clearer and therefore can zero in on what it needs to be doing in order to become closer to Christ-likeness, become closer to the way that Adam was when he was created. Pure, no pollution in him, no extraneous things were there, but he was pure. That purity we await after the resurrection of the dead and the great judgment, where people will indeed become pure, and there won't be any need to worry about all these sorts of things. Indeed, we walk on a minefield at present. No matter how strong your faith is, we walk on a minefield in thoughts, words, deeds, feelings, all those sorts of things. Because from all sides, we are bombarded by wrong things, often falsely justified by scientific research, certain politics which have come into the world and which the world has swallowed because they have been deprived of proper education about these things. Young people are essentially ignorant of history and of all the things that have happened last century and the century before that have caused great distress in the world. They are ignorant of it, and therefore they fall easy prey to all the different isms, political isms, and also to the aspect of hating the truth, hating Christianity. Today, in addition to this particular reading, we are commemorating some very important saints. One being Apostle Philip. Apostle Philip, he was a married saint. I think he had 2 daughters, or maybe more, 2 daughters. Some years ago, we were blessed to be unworthily gifted a bit of his flesh for the relic. And as you know, every ordained person in the Orthodox Church has a succession of laying on of hands right back to one of the apostles. Evidently, in our case, it's Apostle Philip, a great missionary saint and an intercessor for anybody doing that sort of work. The other one is Saint Gregory Palamas, and Saint Gregory stands with 2 other saints, Mark of Ephesus and who's the other one? 3 of them. They are known as the Pillars of Orthodoxy. Pillars of Orthodoxy. I do a lot of communicating with people who are outside the Orthodox Church, whether they be Roman Catholics, Protestants, or whoever. There's just such a hatred against these 3 saints: Gregory, Palamas, Mark of Ephesus, and the other one is Photius the Great. There's such hatred. The Vatican has actually issued coloured, like pictures, diagrams, trampling upon these 3 saints, giving them the most horrible names, really putting them down. And it's all because all those 3 of them stood up against the Roman attempts to take over the Orthodox Church when it was at its weakest, when it was attacked by Muslims and different barbarian tribes. The Orthodox appealed to Rome to help them, help us with this fight against these barbarians. And he said, okay, if you come over and, glorify the Pope and do all this, we'll help you. And a great number of priests and bishops did that. But these 3 did not. And they saved orthodoxy from that takeover. This is why there's such vehement hatred against them, because by themselves they stood up to an overwhelming magnitude of different non-orthodox beliefs, which crushed and did not allow orthodoxy to fall into the hands of the heterodox. If ever you want to look up some of the material about that, I invite you to do that, because it is shocking to read how they criticise these 3 great saints, miracle workers, true, steadfast theologians and people of true understanding about the providence of salvation. And they trample upon them because politically they didn't bow down to Rome. Shocking. You'd think that the worst they could do is maybe say, well, they didn't bow to Rome, so we have nothing to do with it. But no, they put such vehement words in it and spread it amongst the flock, and that flock spreads it to others, particularly now that we have all these media outlets. Anyone who reads it thinks, oh yeah, these 3 saints must be really bad guys. Got through, they're the total opposite of great saints and miracle workers. And if ever you are wavering in your faith in any sort of things, if you don't understand, pray to them. There's a very good book, it's quite thick, but very readable, called The Pillars of Orthodoxy, the 3 Pillars of Orthodoxy. Gregory Palamas, Mark of Ephesus, and St. Photius the Great. 3 of them together. I think that's all we need to say today. Tomorrow we begin Nativity Lent for this coming nativity period. And for those who are living in Victoria and understand anything with a heavy heart, given the political outcomes that occurred yesterday, with those who ran tyrannies for the past 12 years are back in force. What tyranny they're going to do next, we can only guess. But as some people say, there's going to be a lot of people leaving Victoria on account of this, running away from this tyranny. The trouble is, if you run away somewhere else in Australia, it's only a matter of time because that gets caught up as well. So we have to find ways of dodging these sorts of things and making sure that they do not affect our spiritual life and our striving for salvation through the church which Christ has given to us, in order that we may be one, as he said in his priestly prayer, just as Christ and the Father are one. God help us with these struggles, preserve us and protect us in all things.